And we did have one cancellation of a speaker, Mr. Ray. He will be replaced by Dustin Monroe. Dustin Monroe is the founder and CEO of Native Generational Change, a grassroots organization that is working to improve daily life for all Native Americans. He is a member of the Assiniboine and Blackfeet Tribe of Montana and military veteran. Dustin has a business degree and an emphasis in management from the University of Montana, master's in public administration, and working on a PhD in medical anthropology. With over 13 years of experience in management, Dustin has gained an expertise in working with various nonprofits for Native American issues and people. We are proud to have Dustin Monroe as our sponsor for this conference, and introducing Dustin Monroe.
Thank you, Jesse. And it was Native Generational Change. I ain't got money like that. It's the organization. I'd just like to say thank you guys for allowing me to come up here. My relative Ray couldn't be here today, so I wanted to step in for him and kind of go over. I'm going to go over a little different. I'm not a fluent speaker. My dad's Myron Hoops from Fort Belknap. So I say hi to my relatives. I'm also Skapapakani. I'm Blackfeet, so I'm Lakota. But yeah, I always make sure I say both because both people get mad at me if I don't say either one. And I know they got this TV. I really get it on Facebook now if I don't say I'm either one. So, and I'm also got some relatives in Rocky Boy and Fort Peck. So, but some of the stuff I want to talk about today is decolonization through language revitalization. Do you guys talk about in your guys' communities about decolonization or these concepts? Does anybody I really didn't understand what it meant. It was almost like the word sovereignty. I really didn't really know what that meant when I first started my studies, but I'd always heard it thrown around like tribal council chambers and different things like this, like we're a sovereign, or people tell me, you can't do this, you're sovereign. But then I was like, how can I get arrested if I'm sovereign? I'm off the res, right? I was like, you can't give me a ticket, I'm sovereign, here's my my ID. Throw it out instead of my license, And so I had to learn these principles when I came to school, and so that's what I'm studying. I'm studying medical anthropology. I'm actually looking at intergenerational mobility through intergenerational mobility for Native American communities. And basically what that means is the crab in the bucket effect, where basically how do you create the outlier of the person that actually goes out, just goes out and actually gets the education, but at the same time, that's not good enough. I didn't want to just study that part because that's not really success. That's based in Western view, that's success, just going out and getting the education. But then I also want to look at the other aspect of somebody that actually learns their culture back too, because you have to have both in my eyes in order to be truly successful. So at one point in my life, I'm getting successful, but at the same time, I'm still pitiful because I'm learning my language, both languages. I'm trying to learn both. And I'm also learning my culture. And so I'm trying to do that as much as possible. So I'm still a baby in both, I guess. And so with the decolonization, with that, it's a big emphasis, and you'll see it all around the world. There's all different types of indigenous communities all around the world really looking at this concept, and especially with the internet, everything. There's different studies, but it's more of in Europe, New Zealand. So a lot of the literature I read is more based from different countries than my own country. And another thing about the decolonization, for me, I really think that's where we're going. When we start talking about language revitalization, that's really what we're talking about, is the decolonization. And I just got asked in an interview, what is the biggest thing that Native Americans are fighting for? What are your biggest things? I was asked like the simple ones, like, is it the land? Is it Kerr Dam? Is it the water? Is it the, what does someone else say? Oh, you guys can do your religion now. Or is it Columbus Day? I got all these things. But for me, it was I said, we're still fighting assimilation. And I said, what I do for the next generation, because that's really how I was taught to really look back the 7 generations. And I said, the new fight in today's society for Indian people is based on our children's minds, in order to really save us, because like the way I look at it is, for my child, he'll know way more than I'll ever know at that age. And I'm proud of that. I'm sharing in these apps that are coming out. I'm not a fluent speaker, but I practice. And so I'll walk around my community, and I get the Blackfoot app, and I'll walk around, or I'll take some words that my grandma shares with me from Balnep, and I'll go around my neighborhood, and I'll just start with the basics. And so while we're learning, we're trying to speak, and I was influenced by Jessie. Jessie's a little girl. She really, it was really special to see that, and how he was raising hers. And I thought, this is something I need to do in my own household. So I'm not just waiting for the schools to do it. I'm being proactive about it and doing it in my own household. And so with the decolonization through language revitalization, that's something that I guess it's going to be my career work. And it's just taking my culture, and I'm not trying to commodify it and make it something so tangible that I lose the sacredness of it. But I want to be able to advance to the next where we're at. And I had a friend tell me once that Native people, that we were always advancing. And so I don't think it's so bad that for change, I think that we need change in order to come. Because when the horse came, right, we didn't just keep with the dog still. We got out of the dog days. What do? We became better riders than anybody out there, And so I feel like as Native people, because I've had some white friends being like, well, this decolonization, you guys want to go back to teepees and hunting buffalo? I said, we would have probably had what I tell them, we would have probably had the PlayStation before you, because we'd have probably traded the Chinese first, We've always evolving. We're an evolving people, and we always have. I said, we had to show you guys how to take showers, So I said, we're evolving people. And I said, don't ever think just because I say decolonization, like I'm trying to do this whole radical movement where we're going to go back to this. I said, we're always going to be moving forward. And it's what we do as a people. So some of the things I want to look at decolonization through language realization. Share some bullets down right here. I was also, I worked for other organizations, and I've also did the lobbying up in Helena. So when we worked with Jonathan on the first bill, the first language bill, it was quite hard to try to get that through. They were saying, you guys need to teach. What did they tell me? Oh, you guys need to teach each other it. And you're trying to tell these people, these Republicans, a lot of them are like, well, why are we going to give you money? We're not giving the Irish money. We're not trying to get that going, or we're not giving. We have Spanish, and so you guys can learn that. That's useful, And so I had all the craziness telling me this, and they're like, you guys need to teach each other. We don't need to come out of this. And I remind them that, I said, how much money did you guys spend trying to get rid of our language? I said, where did that come from? I said, you guys spent over $1 million, at one time in our history trying to get rid of our language. And you had boarding schools. And I said, what about those? How much were put into those boarding schools to rid of us of our language? And I said, the money that you're going to give us right now, I said, that's not giving us. That's something that we earned. I said, that's not giving us nothing. And I said, what? I pay tax dollars too. I live in Missoula. And I said, so do a majority of Native Americans. We pay our taxes. We pay just like everybody. I said, you try to act like we're different. But I said, we pay taxes, and this is what we want as citizens of Montana and as the tribal nations. I said, we're unique, but at the same time, we're no different. If you guys don't put money for there, we need money for this. And so I was trying to talk, and some people got it, some did, and other people were like, they said they supported it, and we got enough, and it was very special. I remember when I got passed, that was one of the best feelings right there, to actually see that come up and see the votes that we got for that. But the biggest thing with that, though, is that was one step, and that was really like something where it inspired me as a youth to actually start going forward. Well, I guess I'm not that young, but I sounded some. I kind of watch when I say youth now. But gonna get gray. I might just talk about like, shit, I can't really say I'm youth no more. Next generation, I don't know. Generation, is that what you call them? You're that one. But so I seen that, and I seen the power of the people and how we could actually get things through. And so it really started making me think, and then even online, looking at what other communities all across America were doing, and how even getting out and voting, that's another form. Even voting is another form of decolonization, because if we didn't have those people in there that were progressive people, we would have never had that language. We may never have had this conference that we're having right now to be able to talk about it, or have positions like Jason, or a lot of stuff. Everything trickles. And so I really look at that. And so getting out and voting, and also voting even in your tribal elections, and voting progressive leaders that aren't just kind of beaten down by what happened in the past, because it's a whole new generation. And I see a lot of people, especially getting on tribal council, and I see Dana. She's doing a lot of good work over there in Crow, and so it's very inspiring to me. But I wanted to share a couple things right here. Let me see. Has anybody ever heard of Linda Smith? Yes. Anybody know how to say her middle name or that middle? I still don't know how to say her middle. So I always say Linda T. Smith. So my my professors are probably tired of me quoting her here. And so this right here, my organization, Native Generational Change, the reason I named it Native Generational, because a generation, when I looked up the meaning of it, was 30 years. And I really think that's really where I'm looking at when I say I'm looking back. I'm really wanting to, hopefully in 30 years, I can look at the impacts and they will be sustainable. And I think that we're doing a lot of stuff within that. Some of her model here, the Indigenous Research Agenda, this is inside her book. I copied this right here, and it's always something when I'm doing my work, because usually a lot of our programs and a lot of the nonprofits out there, NGOs, I mean, I'm not trying to dog on people or something, but I'm just going to be straight up honest in my beliefs. I feel like they're Band-Aids. They're keeping the ship afloat, but they're not really making systemic change. They're not bringing the agenda forward as much as we should. You know, we should be at the tables. Every time we should be at the tables trying to figure out how can we get this forward in our way, because Western conceptual thought isn't the same as ours. But at the same time, we can, I guess, combine our thoughts and try to make sure that we're bringing it forward with them. And so with the self-determination right here, that's really the word I focus on, is actually determining, because I think that's the most powerful thing we have right there. And decolonization right here, the political, you know, I make sure that we go and we speak. Well, just like yesterday, right, we had Aloise Cabell. You know, she was a famous woman too, and she did a lot for our people. But that was one step. Now we need this next generation. We need to keep going further, pushing it further, making people accountable. And so we got Aloise Cabell yesterday. We got her. I went to that meeting, and so that will be a day in the state of Montana. But that's another step, right, for our children. You might think that's such a small thing, but when you look at your children, right, and it says that Aloise Cabell on the calendar, and they're able to look at that, even though she was in our time, right, this is going to be generations. That's stuff that like we need to look at, because a lot of times I think we look at it and I think we're not getting the wins, we're not progressing. We are progressing, because even having that day in the state of Montana, it's not Thomas Jefferson, it's nothing like this, right? That's somebody that was in our communities. And I really think that's stuff that we need to start, when you're doing it, not downplaying it so much, but understanding the wins that we're getting. Well, even like in Billings, right? Was it Medicine Crow? Joe Medicine Crow, elementary, right? These are wins, and these people that are still living, even like there. Why don't we have that in Missoula? You know, we could do that even here. We can name a school after a leader here. You know, yeah, we could. Yeah, which one? Chief Charlie, yeah, but even more, right? So keep pushing, right? That's what I'm really, Native Generational Change is really what we're trying to do. We're trying to push the limits. You know, places like this, because when kids go to those schools, they ask, who is this person, right? Where my son goes to school right now, Lewis and Clark, we have all the tribal flags up. And so they're able to see those. But those are the things where we need to start looking, and I mean, we're not gonna make drastic changes, but those little changes do make a difference. And right there, when we talk about that, that's the social right there, psychological. And then a lot of things that are happening right now, even in Indian country. This is a little off topic, but we have groups that are coming in, they're feeling threatened by Native communities. There was a group called Sierra, and my organization, we went up there and we actually protested against them. Some good people come. But this group Sierra, they're anti-Indian, they want to get rid of reservations. And so these are some of the people that we deal with, but we keep moving forward and progressing forward through them. Some of the other stuff that we have to do right here, I really like the 4 steps of our transformation. And so some of this stuff, like when we're going through and we're getting those little changes right there, like Alois Cabell, we're getting the language, putting the money back in the communities. It's part of the transformation. The mobilization, like even when we go and we stand up and we bring people to the Capitol, people of DC, we have our Native leaders. This right here is an example of mobilization. We're actually all coming together and being able to talk, and a lot of work goes even when we're in breaks, meeting each other. talking, that's part of mobilization. But they need to be able to come here with common interest in how do we move this forward. And when you look in this room right now, you know, we have all ages in here, and that's inspiring. We should always remember that. Healing. You know, I don't think these are all separate. You know, in my mind, they're all together. Because I feel like that's part of, what do you call it, intergenerational trauma. So when we're coming like this, it also starts healing our communities, because the research showed from a professor from Harvard that trauma has actually, it's embedded in the genes of Native Americans, and it has been. So our genealogist over there, I think he's from Navajo country, and he's actually showing that research right now. Next one here. If anybody got any questions, you guys can just ask too. I like to try to be interactive here. Let me see, I don't talk about that one. This is another thing too right here. What do you guys think about this? This is some stuff for me too that I want to kind of learn while I have this opportunity to have you guys in here. I know it's kind of controversial. I guess that's kind of me. I'm kind of controversial a little bit because I'm pushing. Some people like my ideas, some people don't. But I really believe in changing the books that our children learn, curtailing it towards Montana Indian history. So then when a child opens up a book, or even any child of any race, when they open up a book, they see, you know, they can learn about all the tribes here and the history here. They can learn about the Baker Massacre. They can learn about what's going on contemporary. And they're not looking as Native Americans as such something that like died off in 1910, you know, or looking and having this joke, like the Geronimo joke, right? Where everybody says because they read about that in there, but actually making Native American history no different than African American history, making it contemporary. Because when you open up a book, you'll read about President Obama. You'll read about this now in the books that they're coming out with. And that's something that's happening right now. But actually opening up the books and learning about what's going on today, about some of the things, even in Montana. You know, we should have like the language realization bill that Jonathan Winnie Boy, that should be in our books when our kids open them up. And every so many years we get these books. What do you guys think about making that change in the schools? Do you think that would be something? The reason I talk about this is the ACLU was interested in doing this change in schools and reservations that get Johnson O'Malley money. And if your school district gets Johnson O'Malley money, you're actually, if you're part of the Title VII, I'm just learning all this now. My teacher's over here learning this guy elected to Title VII. So I'm learning about these now. But if you're if you live on a reservation right now and you get this Johnson O'Malley money, you could actually change your textbook. You guys have the power to do this, and what's taught to your children, because that's one of the stipulations. Yes. Now I don't have all the answers. I'm just learning this now.
So I just wanted to share something with you that when you do, like I teach the kindergarten immersion at Browning Public Schools, and I work with middle school students, and I did a lot of the history of Native Americans. You need to really critique your books, because some of the books that your kids might be getting are not, there's no truth to some of them. In fact, there was a book that I opened up that had the Blackfeet Indians, and the woman was wearing a basket hat.
So it's like a Northwest
You
end.
have to
Yeah.
critique them, because some of them are, they're misinformed. There's no truth to some of them. You really have to critique them in order to be correct with your students.
You know, and this I think is really a fascinating, important discussion for all of us, because how we approach this on the reservation may be different as to how we would approach it in a public school here in Missoula. But one of the things I've said on a lot of text review boards, and so yeah, it's really important to make sure that those corrections happen, you know, with your kids. And also, the Office of Public Instruction has this Indian Education for All, where all of the Indian content is supposed to be incorporated, but the systemic and racism and the resistance we have across Montana in some districts, in one district I know for sure, the superintendent had the one language instructor implement you have to have a 5-year plan for a goal of how you're going to implement Indian education for all. And she had one instructor teach from K through 12 at Holgo, which is really totally unacceptable. But more critically, the school board, who was all Indian, endorsed her. So we have like a lot of work to do with our people, and I think that Mr. Laframboise talked earlier about the shame, the cultural shame. A lot of our people don't want to talk about the intergenerational trauma with all the sexual abuse and how our language was like beat out of my father and broke his fingers, and we were told never to learn the language. So that's another element we talk about, sort of the sense of shame and all of this colonization that has been embedded in our DNA. We have a lot of work, and it's really encouraging to see you pursuing a degree, a PhD in the area of trauma. But I really feel we need to draw on our language and our ways of knowing to begin to respond to some of the trauma and bring some of our people out of the cultural shame. Like a lot of people will not say anything, they'll just be quiet, just be silent, or say it doesn't apply to them and minimize it, how everything's being minimized. So, thank you.
Thank you. Here's somebody else over here. Over here. Yes, ma'am.
Or else you get this much in a textbook about a nation from Montana. When I was in the 5th grade in Barrow, Alaska, the heading for Alaska was Alaska, a myth. And I threw that book down and I said, I wasn't born in a myth. And I never opened it again. But I learned through other books the history of this country, but it never mentioned us. Like we didn't exist. And all the things that happened to the Aleuts on the Russian side, enslaving them, that is not in the history books in Alaska. But it formed Alaska that way. And I don't appreciate that, being left out. Because we were there for thousands of years, existed. In fact, the Russians never even came up to the North Slope and just dealt with the Aleuts that they found while they were lost, trying to discover something.
That's well put. I like that. It's true. Does anyone have anything over here? Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, ma'am.
I can't remember exactly. My son was like in 5th grade, and he goes, "This is for Mom." And I looked at it and I said, "What is savages?" And I was blank. And the best thing I could tell him is that that's the way of people describing us, you and I. One's very different color. And until this day, I haven't brought it up again. And that's sad.
Well, let me share a story with you.
No, I mean, to be that blank.
Yes, I totally agree with you. I had, my twin son is sitting over there, and I was with the other twin, Robert, and he was 5. We walked into a store in Cardston, Alberta. My son had never heard that word before. He walked out, and he came up to me and was pulling on my shirt and said, "Mom, what's a savage? Am I a savage?" I mean, and I, where did you hear that? And he said, "These 5 kids call me a savage. What is it?" He couldn't even pronounce the V. He was calling it a savage. I didn't know what to tell him. I was shocked.
Yeah, and I like the idea of you talking about us changing that.
I think it's important because even if you look at the English language and you look at our language, right? Like a lot of times I was at the Badger 2 Medicine here, I went to the constellation about that, about the Section 106, anyway, we had that. And even one of the guys, the park guys, got up and tried saying what the name of, because I really didn't know the true name of Bad Routine Medicine. Remember we got up there, and the park ranger guy tried to come up there and tell us what the name was. Tell us the history, our history. And was it John Murray that stood up? And so I think that happens quite a lot, and it's almost institutionalized, where you got people, they're trying to do good, and they think that they're doing this, and they get up. But then you had a whole thing of, our tribal elders and people there that were experts in this, and he had a whole room that he could have used and been like, let me defer to, John or somebody, and actually talk about what we call it and why some of the differences, because a lot of Western thought, I'm in anthropology, and that's like one of the worst majors you can go in being in. It's really challenging for me, because some of the words we use are like informants. And where I'm from, an informant's like a bad thing. I have some family that was AIM, you don't say informants in our house. So it's almost hard for me to write that. And so I kind of had to get permission from my teachers not to use that, but she said if you publish something, you got to use it, but I kind of want to get away from that. Yes, ma'am?
In politics in Browning, we just know it as the seated strip.
As a what?
The seated strip. We seated it to the government.
Yes.
But that's my dad was to politics. His name is Joe Medicine.
Yes.
And he always referred to the seated strip. I'm not sure.
I think a wonderful way to change this using language revitalization, decolonization for informant is to use, is it the Brave Dog Society that are kind of the protectors? So when you use it, so you need to call them brave dogs rather than informants.
Yeah.
You could make that transformation. It would be very instructive for anthropology.
That would be. Help me. So get that help me over here. But so there's things like that, and that's where like language, it doesn't just fall just in realization. It's really being a Native American, like it's all part of our lives. And if you're going to become an academic or anything you're even doing, even if you're just a regular community member, there's things that it falls within. It's not something you can be separated, and it's something you shouldn't try to be separated from. When I was growing up, I don't always say the words right, but I'll ask, like Jesse will help me with different words. My grandma, my dad, it's kind of it's good because I'm learning. Because when I was little, I was embarrassed. I was really, like, when we talk about shame, I was embarrassed to try to say a word because I didn't want to say it incorrectly. And I didn't even know my grandma could speak until she was on her way out, and she went back to speaking Blackfeet in the nursing home. And I didn't know until she was talking to somebody else, and I was like amazed, But she went back because of Alzheimer's in her mind. So it was pretty amazing, though. But I want to show you guys one more thing, and then I'll kind of start cutting her out. But I want to talk about that, and that's just kind of some of the stuff that I want to try doing. But I think in our communities, we should start trying to push the limits, and actually start thinking about the word. So much is pushed on sovereignty, but actually looking at self-determination and determining where we go in this next generation. Let me see here.
But also,
Yes.
but rather than looking at self-determination or
Yes, ma'am.
sovereignty, to identify us by our tribal, our citizenry, or citizens like of the Ani Nation or whatever nation. And I think that has a better sense of.
No, I think that would be cool. I think, I think that's the next movement, is actually identifying with what we call ourselves, our traditional names, And so when you look on when you come and you do consultation with the state of Montana, federal government, that, that it is our traditional name, that it isn't just, Blackfeet, Crow, Fort Belknap, that we actually start figuring out words and start figuring and determining what we want to be called for the future, and coming together as communities and taking over that, because language has so much with non-natives and how they perceive. There's a lot of power in language, and I'm learning that. And I think we got to be able to start taking back that power, and I think that we can, and I think that we have the capacity. In Montana, we're very fortunate to have a tribal college on every reservation in Montana, and I think that we got to start thinking about that and how to push the limits, not just sustaining and settling for that, but actually pushing the limits. Let me look at one more thing here and see if I can get it. Oh, sheesh, I can't get it. But one thing that I was really is going up here is up in Salish land up here, CSKT, up in the land up here, is that they actually changed their signs, and I see that starting to be different places, different reservations of the different mile markers and different things like this that they're doing, but they're actually changing that. And I think that's another form that we got to start thinking about, that is actually incorporating that even in our tribal buildings, our bathrooms, calling them, because when you start seeing that, it starts becoming everyday life. So it's not just something that's only spoken during ceremony, but it's something that's spoken in everyday life. And I think that's stuff that we need to start pushing in our communities, and that's things that we can control, that we don't have to have outside control about that. And it's just part of just thinking about it, is thinking about the power of language and how to utilize it in our communities. I think that's about all
And I think
Well,
another important discussion to the renaming is to assess and determine in each nation, are we going to express it through the linguistic format or through the phonetic format?
Yes.
That is so critical, because a lot of us, before you can express it through the linguistic format, you need to know all the little curly cues, and are those curly cues further colonizing us rather than anything else? Maybe Rebecca can speak to that one.
Yeah, I remember we were just talking about that when we have all these different little entities working individual, and you have different silos, that actually getting them together and getting other people together, then actually coming from a community approach rather than an individualistic approach, and actually, you know, doing that approach and coming together and figuring out how do we want to do this, how do we want to go forward. But it's the kind of talks that we need to start having in our communities and start thinking about this. Got anybody else have any more questions? Any more comments? Yes.
So you were talking about, changing different names, like our traditional names. I know up in Calgary, the Sarsi Indians, their name, they're not considered Sarsi anymore, they're Tsutsina.
So is that recognized by like up in Canada?
The name,
Yeah.
their language, and that's their name now, and it's known, they don't use that Sarsi as being changing our charts, they're changing that.
I think down here in 48, we need to, even all over, we need to start thinking about how do we do that and define who we are, start recognizing the importance of that. Anybody else? Yes.
There's one thing, I used to work at Writing of Stone Provincial Park, I used to name, and one of the things that was really important to me while I was working there was being in such a sacred place. The government is starting to recognize that this is something that needs to be represented respectfully and appropriately. And they're one of the first places to really go out and say, how do you want to be represented? What's the right way to do this respectfully? And they had an internship where, we hired Native people from the tribes, the local area, and they were the ones that did the interpretation. So taking students, teaching them these skills, and then also providing that information in a way that's appropriate and how we want to be represented, right? And this is something that's not just for this one place, but it's something that we were saying this model here can be used in many places for Indigenous people all over the world, where you have the university here, right? You have one on the other side of the country, on the other side of the world. We recognize where we are, that connection to the place, that needs to be educated to people. And you take that and have them brought in, because like the guy, saying what Badger was all about, right? It's nice to hear that from people that know what they're talking about, but you're saying it's better when it comes from us, and that needs to be recognized in all these organizations, that this is what we want, and it needs to be like the community thing. Like, we need to share that, like push that. We want to represent ourselves. We don't want you speaking for us, because we can do it for ourselves.
That's all I got. Oh, yeah. There we go. One more. Keep going.
Kind of add on to that, I know, and I'm from right here up the road here in Kalispell, Salish country, Kootenai too. That's kind of the things, our boundaries overlap. Throughout the history, all of our tribes here, we've all overlapped, fought each other, whatever. And I think we need to recognize those things and speak and meet together with those and come to speak our history. I'm not going to tell you what your history is. You're not going to tell me what mine is. But with the naming and with the language and everything, our homes here, meth, alcohol, and drugs alcohol was always the biggest thing, but meth is a new monster that's really, it's devastating us, And we have so many people who don't even know who they are. They grew up, maybe their parents were in alcohol so heavy, and now then the younger ones come up, and I'm 51 now, I grew up in that. And then the drugs will come up, and I'm a grandpa now. And my grandkids, what are they going to grow up into? What are they going to what kind of world is it going to be for them? This is Montana, We have, all our reservations, we have non-Indian people who just wanted to see us destroyed. They want to see us no more, they want to wipe us out. They don't care what happens to us, but we have a land base, and that's what they want. They want that land base. They want what we have, what we got. We all believe in our prayers, I think this is where we can collectively pray for us to bring these things back to educate our own kids, educate and tell our own history, so those who don't have families, those who don't have the language, those who don't have of our own people can learn something somewhere from that, They can see it somewhere, because they may not have people in their families telling them who they are. And that shame is so thick and heavy. And it's a real hard jacket to shake off of you. We teach in an adult program, and Kayla is the other teacher. We just learned these past couple of years our language. And I'm not saying we're fluent. I'm saying we can speak and we can understand a lot. And we're in this battle too, and it is hard to speak your language. Even when it's just like there's something there that kind of stops you. But we gotta push through that. We always gotta push through that. We gotta keep pushing through that. And we gotta keep moving forward, Our ancestors did that for us. We owe it to them, we owe it to ourselves, and to these little ones. But changing determine how we can educate our kids. Whatever's been doing, how it's been being done, it worked to get us into this room, but it's not good enough. It's not good enough. And you were saying we evolve and we adapt and hang on to that. I think it's time to show that we do that, And instead of, everybody that works in language, it's hard to bring people in. It's hard to get people in those doors. Sometimes we feel like, we look like we're just a little private club within our own people groups. Because everybody wants to look in. I know what it's like to look from the outside, looking in, wanting to be a part of that group. Feeling like you don't belong. We all need to be looking out there and bringing these people in, telling them, hey, sit down here, we've been waiting for you, we got all this work, this is all your work that's ahead of you, we've been waiting for you. A lot of work to do, and that's the kind of attitude we need to attack this with. And the same thing, wherever it is, I'm from language, I don't know anything about what your, the history, of course, educational-wise, as far as being a professor or whatever, a teacher, I know what language is, that's my battle, that's what I'm choosing to fight right now. But we all need to line up together and do that and make that happen. But I think really, respectively, if all the tribes, we could all collectively meet somehow and agree, we're going to say this in our history, and we know we're stepping in some of your country, but we're teaching our people our history, and we know you're going to teach our people your history, and we know your boundaries are going to come into ours and you're teaching your people. That's a fact. And so, when we can't ignore it. We're going to argue about this. We're Salish and Kootenai. We're fighting each other every day over these things, and we're tirelessly throwing rocks at each other. When we have enemies within our reservation, our communities, we'd love to see us destroyed. And we're doing it to ourselves. These things that we need to really be mindful of and take a better look at that.
I think the other edge of the sword is I also did a racism symposium with a guy named Russell Rowland when I was over in Billings. Billings is, oh cow, fighting an uphill battle sometimes. You've seen it here when we passed, got Columbus Day changed with all the Facebook tough guys, you know, and their comments and their racism that they wrote just for changing that, you know. And
Can you
yes, ma'am.
go to that one?
The Columbus Day?
Yeah.
Here, the city of Missoula no longer recognizes Columbus Day. It's called Indigenous Day here. That was brought forward by Ruth. Randy brought that forward, and my organization, a couple other organizations came forward to support that. And so we'll no longer have that in the city, and it will still be a day off for employees. So there's multiple layers with that. You don't just change it in the school, so we need to change it within the schools. The university did not change it yet. And so there's different layers of that we need to go through, but that's another thing, even looking at language and having non-natives recognize the importance of that. But every city council member voted for it though. But there was one lady that came in there and she was kind of crazy. You know? We told her we love her though. You know? But yes.
Talking about, you know, the respectfulness of our people, we had a gentleman that came and spoke at our place at SAR, and he talked about the importance of the name of a child. Give the child a name. Let that child live that name. If you're gonna give a little child an Indian name, give him like maybe Pita Skumapi, you know, he's gonna be an Eagle boy. Well, that little boy is gonna grow up and he's gonna respect what he has and he's gonna grow in it and grow in it. Just like she's talking about the savages, I was telling her that Red Fury. I said that tells you a story of how they told about this boy being a savage. But in a good, that boy really shows who he really was in the end because he rode all that way to get that woman help, and that's where we are. So when we're talking about giving everything else names, you know, it's all in the name.
It's powerful. I think even the other side of that sword, when I think about that, is how do we educate our non-native friends? You know, and by the reason I look at the books being so much true, it seems like a lot of my friends and even academic friends, if they read it in a book, it's true. You know, you can put total lies in that book, and all of a sudden it becomes true. And some of these people, they'll quote you with untrue statements. It's almost like Wikipedia, right? But they still put it in the book. And so that's what I feel the power of actually changing the books and actually hoping the rest of the state of Montana, because I think Indian Education for All it's a start, but it's not the solution. Because those teachers, and a lot of these teachers can choose what they want to teach. And Indian Education for All was passed, but it wasn't really implemented until Denise Juneau got in there. And then it kind of got pushed a little further. Well, we're about to lose Denise. You know, she's going to go to a different level and different, but at the same time, the lady that's running for it right now, I'm going to speak with her, but we need to keep pushing that and actually getting the books changed, because racism is learned. It's learned when you're a little kid. It's not something that you just come out and you're just like, hey, you know, I don't like these guys because they're color or something, you know. It's something that's learned and taught in the household. You know, I really didn't know. You know, as an Indian, you know, I went to one class and we had to talk, how many racist words do you know? I started raising my hand, you know, all these different words they call us. We were like, what do you mean they call you that? I was like, I was called this as a little kid. I didn't even know what to say, you know, because I moved to Great Falls when I was as a little boy. And I had some crazy words. I didn't even know. I had to go home and ask. It wasn't even savage. It was way worse than that. It was like, they called me the PN name. I don't know if anybody knows what I'm referring to, but I got called that when I was a little boy. Got teased because of my skin. And back where I was from, all my family, they're way darker than me. You know, and I was like, you guys are teasing me for this. I mean, the way I talked, you know, I used to really be bad, because I was really wicked, you know. Even though I'm speaking English, it's still a really bad Browning accent I had when I was a little kid. So I got told not to talk. Why do you talk like that? You know, and so a lot of that is just stuff that we have to do. But I guess the other side is actually changing that book to help and change and actually give a child, a non-native child, that chance to actually learn about who we are. And when you change that kid as a little kid, that kid may grow up to be, you know, a governor of the state, a legislator, you know, like John Tester. The reason a lot of times he's really sympathetic to natives is because where he's from. You know, he just grew up down the street. He grew up playing against natives in basketball. He'll always tell me his great stories of, you know, playing different people. But that's why I have, but we don't always have people like that though, you know. But if we can change that book and give that child a chance, I really think that benefits not just native children, but non-native children. Because if we're gonna fight this problem, we gotta remember we got 2 coins, you know, and we are within a state too. And so we gotta remember how to actually help our people, but then also remember there's a different side of that. If we really want to combat racism, and racism through it's called neocolonialism, so I'm learning all these little different terms, right? But neocolonialism, we got to understand how to fight that, and that's a political battle and other battles that we need to be able to take on too and get our people elected. But even non-people, we need them, because with this language revitalization, even the language bill that we got here, there was a lot of it was mostly non-natives, because all we have is like 8, right? That's all we have is 8 representatives that are native in this state that actually sit there. Out of over, what is that, about 150 people? That's not enough votes. So we got to remember that if we really want to get stuff passed, we got to start educating non-natives too about this. So I think that's all I got. I'm gonna try to get out of here now. Thank you.